Tom Cameron Frazier.
Brett Huntley. David Brinkman. John Chen. Tom Brokaw.
Iraq votes just hours before the balloting begins. Preparations and violence. More bombings and a rocket attack hits the American embassy. Hearts and minds winning more than the war, the dirty and dangerous mission for American troops in Baghdad.
We call it trust and confidence, and that's what we're trying to gain with the Iraqi people, the trust and confidence.
The ice storm sweeping the south, knocking out power and glazing over roads and runways. And Marine One, the debate over the plan to put European design right on the south lawn of the White House.
This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, reporting tonight from Baghdad.
And good evening from Baghdad. As the dawn of voting day approaches just a few hours from now, the time has come for this nation, its voters, and a sizable U.S. military force that's been spread out to protect them. Here in Baghdad, we're under lockdown. As the Army puts it, you move it, you lose it. The streets are shut down. Most of the night it's been dead quiet until a short time ago when we all heard the thud of a rocket attack, and then we learned the toll. The insurgents had hit the U.S. Embassy inside the protected downtown Green Zone. 2 Americans dead, a sailor and a civilian. It's a first strike. The Americans are expecting a lot more, but they also expect voters to get to the polls. We begin tonight with this day in Iraq, and my colleague stationed here, NBC's Richard Engel. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. U.S. officials say the rocket struck near an annex to the U.S. Embassy building here in Baghdad, killing the 2 Americans and wounding 5 more.
The building attacked tonight once served as Saddam Hussein's Baghdad headquarters, but U.S. forces
tonight, thanks. Now, just how difficult is this election going to be to pull off? The mere presence of U.S. Marines in Ramadi was enough to spark a firefight there today with insurgents. NBC's Jim Maceda is embedded with the U.S. Marines and watched it all.
Insurgents keeping up the pressure on U.S. Marines in Ramadi. Faster a trained, competent Iraqi force can take hands-on control, the faster U.S. Marines and other U.S. troops here can go home. But most important, Iglesias says, is a successful Ramadi.
Back here in Baghdad, we got a close-up view today at a fast altitude of 50 feet of what this city looks like under lockdown. We were riding along with one of the great names in all the military, a division that's had 2 jobs here, fighting and building, and doing both in a tough neighborhood that's a hotbed of violence. But what they love to do is fly. A low-level helicopter mission over Baghdad. Ever since a Black Hawk helicopter full of men was shot down here, the new flight rules are these: low and fast. That way these Black Hawks don't allow the insurgents any time to squeeze off a shot. This is the 1st Cavalry, the 1st of the 9th. If all that sounds familiar, it's because Francis Ford Coppola made this unit famous. The real-life unit does not play Wagner. This is serious business. And the real-life commander doesn't sound like this.
Smells like victory.
The only similarity, this is Camp Victory, Baghdad. And this is General Peter Corelli, the 2-star in charge. General Corelli decided early on this should be the public face of the 1st Cav. When they're not fighting, they should be building. He says building sewer systems, building relationships. They are hoping both will hold. But still, there are complaints from the very Iraqis they're trying to help in the Baghdad slum known as Sadr City, where life is trying on a good day. This woman says there is no fuel, no gas, there's nothing. Before the Americans came, she says, the situation was bad for us. We are poor and things were bad under Saddam, but now things are even worse. A lot of Iraqis resent the U.S. for knocking out the power and water. Shock and awe left them cold and dry. But the general insists most people in this area never had utilities, but will soon, thanks to the 1st Cav.
We just hooked up clean drinking water to a good portion of Sadr City the other day. To see the looks on the people's face as they saw for the first time ever the fact that they were going to have clean drinking water. Just absolutely amazing.
And we found evidence today that the situation on the streets was improving. Staff Sergeant Dana Campbell had just returned from patrol on his tank and reported the Iraqi military had the area buttoned up with roadblocks and secure.
I was really impressed with them. They're stopping their own vehicles. They're maintaining everything they need to do out there to keep it safe, keep it secure for the civilians out there.
General Corelli sees all of this as good news. He has lost good men here. He has won some hearts and minds, but his view of the people here remains the same.
There's three groups of people in Iraq. There's those that will support us, there's those that are fighting us, and then there's this large group of people that are sitting on the fence. All our reconstruction is aimed at getting those people who are sitting on the fence to support their government.
General Corelli of the 1st Cav, by the way, nearing the end of a long deployment. President Bush says tomorrow's election here will, quote, add to the momentum of democracy, but he cautions it won't instantly solve the problems in Iraq. The comments came in his weekly radio address. He says whatever the outcome, the U.S. will stand beside Iraq's next government. And a program note here tonight, we'll be live right as the polls close here tomorrow morning on Meet the Press. Tim Russert's studio guest will be Massachusetts Senator John Kerry, his first live television interview since last November's election. In Washington tonight, questions surfacing over the president's pick to become the next Secretary of Homeland Security. Specifically, what advice Michael Chertoff gave to the CIA when it comes to interrogation methods in the war on terror. We get more on this tonight from NBC's Rosalind Jordan.
When 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was captured 2 years ago, Michael Chertoff was the head of the Justice Department's criminal division.
History will record it as a landmark victory in the war against terrorism.
But according to today's New York Times, Chertoff, now in line to be the new head of Homeland Security, was also advising the CIA on whether some interrogation techniques could violate federal laws against torture. A White House official tells NBC News Chertoff did talk with the CIA, but says the conversation was limited in scope. He did give advice to the CIA that they should understand the law and not cross the line or come close to crossing the line. He did not advise the CIA on what the law was. That was the Office of Legal Counsel's job. And a Justice Department official tells NBC News Chertoff was never involved in signing off on any specific technique of questioning. But human rights activist Tom Malinowski says he's not reassured.
It's clear that the Justice Department didn't play the role that it was supposed to play in saying no to certain things that were clearly unlawful.
Rosalind Jordan, NBC News, the White House.
Weather is making news in the southeastern United States tonight. Snow, sleet, freezing rain have all brought travel to a standstill from Arkansas through the Carolinas, and more rough weather could be on the way for lots of people. Here is NBC's Martin Savage. And when NBC Nightly News continues from Baghdad this Saturday night, signs of progress elsewhere in the Middle East. Israelis and Palestinians working together for a change. And the big fight over outsourcing that just landed right smack in the president's own backyard. NBC News in depth tonight. The crisis in the Middle East, while all eyes are on Iraq, elsewhere in this region there is new hope tonight for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. For the first time in nearly 2 years, leaders from both sides have actually agreed to meet. NBC's Ron Allen is in Tel Aviv tonight.
NBC News, Gaza.
Back in the U.S., today's scheduled execution of Michael Ross of Connecticut was postponed until Monday. Ross confessed to killing 8 women back in the 1980s and has tried to speed his own death, but his lawyer asked for this delay. The execution, by the way, would be New England's first in 45 years. When Nightly News continues tonight from Baghdad, life under siege, covering the high-risk story in a high-risk zone. Tonight, as Election Day is about to dawn, and this evening we thought we would offer a window into life here. At the ripe old age of 31, our own correspondent Richard Engel is a veteran combat correspondent, having spent more time here than perhaps any other Western television reporter. He is joining us by satellite tonight, even though he is just a few blocks from our camera location. And Richard, that is part of the story. I am prohibited from going where you are and vice versa. This entire trip, we will not see each other in person because of safety. And last night, however, you heard one of the commanding generals, General Petraeus here, say to me on camera why, Brian, you and I could easily walk through the main drag of Baghdad. How did his comments strike you when you heard them?
Brian, I'm not sure if he was being completely frank with you. He must have an idea of how dangerous it really is in this city. For example, I was out for 1 hour today just trying to get a sense of what the mood is here in Iraq. My first stop was an election demonstration that was being held by a Shiite political party. As soon as our team arrived, however, the organizer told us we shouldn't stay. There had been a drive-by shooting, so we left there and went to an Iraqi checkpoint, and then within minutes found ourselves in the middle of a volley of gunfire, and that was only 1 hour in an area of Baghdad that's considered relatively safe.
Richard, we're all under fairly intense security. Automatic weapons are ubiquitous. Everyone carries them here in the security business, and we've heard gunfire each day we've been here. Is that a part of your daily life?
It's not unusual at all. In the past 24 months I've been here in Iraq, there hasn't been a single day where I haven't heard the yattering of automatic rifles or some explosion or two, Brian.
A video greeting and thanks for our colleague and all his hard work will have to suffice given the security situation here. NBC's Richard Engel, our thanks. And we're back in a moment with the fight over just who will get to transport the president.
Exclusive. John Kerry sits down with Tim Russert, his first post-election TV interview, only on Meet the Press.
The Iraqi elections, NBC Nightly News, Monday.
The U.S. Marine Corps is awfully proud of its role in transporting the president on board the white-topped Marine One. The workers at Sikorsky Aircraft in Connecticut have been the proud builders of the chopper for years, but that is about to come to a bitter end. Our report tonight from NBC's Rahema Ellis.
Stratford, Connecticut, home to the Sikorsky Aircraft Plant, builders of presidential helicopters from the Eisenhower era to the Bush administration. For nearly 50 years, a symbol of local pride, now wounded, following yesterday's decision from the government.
We are announcing the selection of Lockheed Martin,
awarding Sikorsky's competitor the honor of designing and building the next fleet of 23 U.S. presidential helicopters and the $6.1 billion that goes along with it.
I can't imagine a president not in a Sikorsky-built, American-made helicopter. It's sad, really sad.
The general feeling is similar to
made in the USA. Lockheed Martin will build portions of its ships with the news. Sikorsky won't be building presidential helicopters. 250 miles north of here, another community is embracing the news that it's now their turn.
It was tremendous. It's like Christmas.
Owego, New York's Lockheed's pitch, the government says, was simply more on target.
This effort will deliver a new helicopter that provides essential improvement in the range, speed, communications capability, and survivability.
And delivering it to the South Lawn for the first time with a European design. Rahema Ellis, NBC News, Stratford, Connecticut.
And that is Nightly News for this Saturday evening. Stay with NBC News for complete coverage of the situation here in Iraq. And again, we'll be live when the polls close tomorrow morning on Meet the Press. We also hope to see you at this same time right back here tomorrow night. I'm Brian Williams, NBC News, reporting tonight from Baghdad. Good night.
NBC News, America's news leader.
Good morning. Iraq votes. The Iraqi people